you written for this instrumentation before?
Yes, I have. In fact, I really love the sound of the clarinet with strings. It's one of my favorite things. I have another Calvino piece called Daughters of the Moon that's just for clarinet, violin, and cello. So it was a lot of fun to write for that again and now have the piano added in.
Yeah.
Yeah, for the theme of We the Whole People, honoring women's suffrage, I took a broader perspective of it. I was really thinking, when you're talking about these kinds of things, you think about, well, what does the world look like ideally? I mean, we want to honor what these people did and the progress that we've made, but I think we never want to stop making progress, and eventually we want 100% parity. And so I was thinking about especially the Mark Twain Letters from Earth, where he's actually writing from the perspective of Satan, of all things, who's come to Earth, and he's writing letters back about humans. And of course it's very satirical, it's very funny. He doesn't have a very high opinion of us. Why would Satan have a high opinion of us? But anyway, the point is that you're looking at humans from an outside perspective. And I think that Italo Calvino does the same thing with the Cosmic Comics. He looks at humans from an outside perspective. And if you can do that, if you can get out of your own, how you grew up, what your own gender is, what your own background, ethnicity, et cetera, I think it's profoundly helpful if we can just concentrate on what makes us human. We all want the same thing, men and women. We want to be comfortable, we want to be safe, we want our loved ones to be happy. I mean, these are things that I was thinking about a lot, and I really do think that when you talk about parity, or when you talk about a world in which we all treat each other with mutual respect, it really helps to just pull the camera back sometimes and take a universal perspective and see us as what we are. So that really drew me to Calvino. And then with the Cosmic Comics, again, I mean, he anthropomorphizes everything, even stars and nebulas. They have all human traits for both good and ill, unfortunately. And again, just seeing human beings that way, I think it's really great because we can say, oh my gosh, we don't want to be this way. We want to be this way, hopefully. So that was my idea. I mean, it's a bit more abstract. It's certainly, yeah, like I said, pulling the camera back a little bit, not specifically related to suffrage per se, but hopefully just kind of thinking if we're going to continue to make progress, and I do believe we've made progress, we're going to have to take these holistic viewpoints once in a while.
Great. And so you have 4 instruments: clarinet, violin, cello, and piano. Do you see each of them in this piece as different characters, different people, different types, or are they one altogether?
I wanted to create at first just this sense of kind of wonder of we're at the dawn of time. There are no human beings yet. This is the cosmos, and I mean the piece just starts with that note in the piano, and it rings, and there's some pizzes in the cello and the violin, and I think I usually do a lot of 7ths and 9ths and things, so I think that's probably what I picked. And then the clarinet sneaks in very, very, very softly. And the whole idea was not that the instruments have their own personalities per se, but just creating this atmosphere, this idea. I want the listener to just kind of immediately, like in George Crumb, Vox Ballinet, he has the players wear masks so that the listeners forget their own humanity for a moment. Like, I really like that idea. And as the piece progresses, perhaps we progress in time to where we are now. So my first concept was absolutely the dawn of time, not much happening, primordial sense of wonder. And then the piece, you kind of work it out in musical terms after that.
Do you have any advice or comments, anything for the performers that you could tell us before we meet to rehearse?
So yeah, I've written a decent number of pieces. I've written a lot of very active, very rhythmic pieces, but I've written a few pieces like this that are much more laid back, that have a lot more space in them. The things that I've found are that it looks really easy on paper, and a lot of times the players think, okay, I'm going to prioritize these other pieces because they're so rhythmic, they're so difficult, they have these gnarly passages, what have you. And then they get into it and they go, oh my God, it's actually harder than I thought. And the issue is always control. I mean, if you're, the clarinet comes in out of nowhere, you really, I think the balance and control between the players is really the biggest issue whatsoever. But then also there isn't a steady beat in this piece very often. And so there's that aspect of it too. And these are always really interesting questions for a composer because, I mean, it doesn't, well, I spend a lot of time thinking, where exactly does that pitch go? I mean, how long does that hold before that comes in. It's a really fascinating, because it changes everybody's perspective on everything. And I chose, a lot of composers would use stopwatches or would say, approximately X number of seconds, but I'm still using traditional notation. And so, if you're at 60 to the quarter note or 76 to the quarter note, to have everybody going 1, 2, 3, 4, and it's unconducted, and to hit those on time every time in a very slow tempo, I've discovered is it can be tricky for people, especially with limited rehearsal time. So I think that, a lot of it is just, feel free to, if there's somebody who's playing from the score or somebody who knows exactly where those hits are, I need to start writing more cues in my parts. This is not for public consumption. I need to start writing more cues so the cellist knows she's with the violinist on those pizzas, because I think that would help a lot. They know to look at each other. But I think if everybody can just take a couple minutes before the rehearsal and just figure out where those line up so they know. Because sometimes it is this, and sometimes it's... So those are always the tricky things. And just because it's a slow piece, I say this all the time, don't underestimate it. Because if we achieve our goal, if we create the atmosphere that we want, I think it'll be quite effective for the audience.